On a quiet, sunlit afternoon, in a middle-class suburban neighborhood, life seemed to be going along just as it always did. People were walking their dogs, kids were playing in the yard, and the gentle hum of everyday life filled the air. But for one black man, this peaceful day would take an unexpected turn. All he had planned to do was pick up his bike, which he had left parked by the mailbox earlier in the day. Simple, right? But this innocent act would lead to something much bigger than he could have ever anticipated. The man, named Marcus, had lived in the neighborhood for a while. He wasn't a stranger to his neighbors. He had made small talk with several of them, waved at a few others as they drove by. He was an easygoing guy, a college graduate, and someone who made it his mission to stay out of trouble. Today, though, he wasn't out running errands, meeting friends, or even working. He was just going to pick up his bike. The bike had been left near the sidewalk after he had used it to run some quick errands, and now he was walking back to retrieve it. As he approached the bike, he noticed someone's curtains move slightly. It was Karen, a woman in her mid-40s who lived a few houses down from him. She had lived in this neighborhood for years, and to her, it was her territory. She knew everyone who belonged in the neighborhood, or at least she thought she did. So when she looked out of her window and saw a black man standing by a bike she didn't recognize, her mind immediately jumped to conclusions. Karen didn't know Marcus. She'd never spoken to him, and she hadn't noticed him before. She didn't know whether he belonged here or not. But in that brief moment, she made a decision, one that would shape the events of the day. From her perspective, this man, Marcus, didn't look like he belonged in this neighborhood. There were no obvious signs of anything wrong, but Karen's gut told her something was off. Was he stealing the bike? Did he have the right to be there? The thoughts swirled in her mind. What's he doing? She thought to herself. Should I call the police? Karen hesitated for a moment. After all, it wasn't the first time she had seen someone she didn't recognize in her neighborhood. But something about Marcus made her uncomfortable. And instead of confronting him, of asking if he was okay, of extending any kind of trust or benefit of the doubt, she did the one thing that seemed easiest in that moment. She picked up her phone and dialed 911. The phone rang in her ear, and Karen's heartbeat quickened as the operator picked up. She didn't know why, but something about the situation seemed serious. I don't know what's going on, she told the dispatcher. There's a man outside my house, and he's standing with a bike. He looks suspicious. I'm not sure if the bike is his. The operator calmly asked for more details. Is he threatening anyone? Is he causing harm? The dispatcher's questions came quickly, and Karen stammered a bit as she spoke. No, he's not threatening anyone, but he looks like he doesn't belong here, Karen replied, her voice trembling slightly. She couldn't explain why she felt this way. After all, nothing was happening out of the ordinary, but still, the fear that gripped her chest made her feel like she had no choice but to take action. The dispatcher reassured Karen that the situation didn't seem like an emergency and advised her to remain inside until officers arrived. Despite the reassurance, Karen couldn't shake her worry. What if he's up to something? What if he's trying to steal the bike? What if something bad happens? Her mind raced with a mixture of fear, confusion, and suspicion. The dispatch operator continued to ask questions, but Karen was too focused on her growing sense of discomfort to think clearly. She didn't know Marcus's story, and in her mind, that made him an outsider, someone to be wary of. Meanwhile, Marcus was oblivious to the fact that he had become the subject of a 911 call. He had simply bent down, grabbed his bike, and began to wheel it down the sidewalk, preparing to leave for the day. But as he did, he noticed something strange, an approaching police car. At first, Marcus thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe there was some sort of routine patrol in the area, but the car slowed down and came to a stop right next to him. Before he could process what was happening, 2 officers stepped out of the car. One was a black officer, and the other was a white officer. They approached Marcus with measured calmness, but with a certain air of authority. The police were trained to handle situations like this, but Marcus couldn't help but feel a tightening in his chest. Why were they here? Had he done something wrong? "Sir, can we speak with you for a moment?" one of the officers asked in a neutral tone. Marcus froze, his heart rate picking up. The last thing he expected was for the police to show up while he was just picking up his bike. "Sure," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. He showed the officers his ID, explained that the bike was his, and that he was just picking it up after a short errand. The officers listened, but there was an uncomfortable pause. "We received a call," the officer explained. "A neighbor called us saying that there was a suspicious person standing by a bike." Marcus, still trying to keep the situation calm, asked, "A suspicious person? Is there some sort of mistake?" The officers nodded and reassured him that they were simply doing their job, but it was clear that the situation had escalated from what was, in reality, an entirely normal encounter. As Marcus spoke with the officers, his mind couldn't help but drift back to the thought, why did this happen? Why did she feel threatened by me just because I was picking up my own bike? The officers, after a few more questions, finally determined that there was no threat, that there was no reason for concern, and they let Marcus go on his way. "We'll just make sure everything's fine here," one of the officers said, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As he walked away, he reflected on the situation. This is what it's like, living as a black man in America. Even the most innocent actions can be seen as threatening. Back in her house, Karen was now standing near the window, watching the interaction unfold. She had been peering through the curtains, feeling guilty, but also trying to understand if she had made the right call. She saw the officers talking to Marcus calmly, their demeanor neutral and professional. As she watched, her feelings of regret and self-doubt began to creep in. Did I overreact? Was I wrong? The police officers, after a few minutes, walked back to their car and drove off. Marcus, unfazed, continued his day. It wasn't until much later that Karen truly understood the gravity of what she had done. She realized that, in her mind, she had allowed her fear and bias to shape her decision, to the point where she had called the police on someone who was simply minding his own business. Marcus wasn't a threat. He was just another person trying to live their life. But Karen hadn't seen that. In her mind, his presence was something to fear. As the days went by, Karen found herself reflecting on the experience. She felt deep regret for what had happened and began to see things from Marcus's perspective. It was a hard realization for her, but it was a crucial one. How could I have done that? She asked herself. How did I let fear dictate my actions like that? Karen knew that she had to confront her own biases, the hidden fears that had led her to make that call. It wasn't enough to simply acknowledge that she had made a mistake. She needed to do something about it. She reached out to organizations dedicated to educating people about racial bias and began having conversations with others in her community about the issue. It was the beginning of a journey toward unlearning ingrained prejudice and fostering empathy. For Marcus, the incident was just another reminder of the reality he faced every day. While he was able to walk away from the situation unharmed, the experience left a lasting impact on him. It reminded him that no matter how calm or friendly he might be, the color of his skin could still lead others to make dangerous assumptions about him. This story was not just about a single misunderstanding. It was about the broader issue of racial bias and how small actions can lead to big consequences when those biases go unchecked. It highlights the importance of reflecting on our own fears and assumptions and recognizing how they shape our perceptions of others. For Karen, it was a turning point, one that made her take a deeper look at her own behavior and led her on the path to unlearning her biases. For Marcus, it was just another reminder of the struggles Black people face daily when navigating a world that often sees them through a lens of suspicion and fear.